Welcome to Armchair Authority, Episode 7, where we are all greatly waiting. I'm Robert. With me are Jack and Edward.
Hello.
Yes, because at the moment the Mueller Mueller report has been finalized and we're waiting on seeing if it's released.
Yep, it was turned into the Department of Justice I don't remember his first name, but his last name is Barr. He's a bit of a Trump crony, but I mean, probably not too biased, I guess. I don't know. Seems like.
Well, before this podcast, Edward shared his opinion of the report and how it would affect Trump ultimately, and he said that it wouldn't actually do anything. Can you explain your reasons why?
Oh, I feel like if there's any like major news coming out, it would have come out already in terms of like indicting Trump for anything. So, I think if we're looking at it from the perspective of wanting Democrats to win, it would have been better if honestly this report just waited like another 2 years or something and just let the election play out. Because now Trump is going to get up there on his pulpit and he's going to be like, "Oh, I'm FBI certified to be trustworthy." That's how the game is played.
Didn't Mueller say something like he was of the opinion you can't indict the president, you can only impeach him?
Well,
Because he's part of the executive branch.
I mean, at this point, I don't know if I want either thing, right? Or at least impeachment.
Yeah. But even if the report was bad for Trump, he probably wouldn't say anything about indictment because it was of opinion you can't.
I mean, I guess even if the report turns out bad for him, the most we could do is just wait until his term ends, and it ends pretty soon.
Yeah, I feel like if there's evidence that Trump himself was directly colluding with like the Russian government, I think something would have happened already, right? Because that would be a pretty big deal. That'd be like some traitor territory.
But I mean, we all know that in this country, if you're rich, you can basically get away with anything.
Yeah, it helps.
You know, I guess we can't really say much more about the Mueller report until it actually comes out, right?
Yeah.
So, I guess we'll just have to monitor that situation and see how it turns out in the future.
It's also worth.
Go ahead.
One more thing. It's also worth noting that the Mueller investigation wasn't the only investigation against Trump. There have been other investigations against them. I think New York has several involving various types of fraud. So that stuff also is going to play out eventually.
Is the fraud in relation to his like supposed wealth that he lies about all the time, or
Yeah.
is that?
I think it might be related to like secret like meetings as well. That yeah, I don't know the specifics of it. Obviously, the Mueller would have been like the biggest like groundbreaking one, but there's other serious ones that he has to deal with.
I see. So we'll just have to wait to see if the hammer drops down on him and delivers justice at all.
Yeah.
But anyways, speaking of people getting off the hook, well, speaking of people who use their wealth to get the things they want is the more accurate term. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the school payoffs that have been happening recently with certain celebrities making generous donations, hiring someone to beef up their child's resume and fake their activities, like saying that they were in sports teams or they were in this competition, that competition, in order to get those kids into top tier schools like Harvard, Yale, etc. So, first off, I don't think it's any surprise to any of us that this is already happening and has been happening pretty much since the beginning of time. Money can basically buy you anything, right?
Yeah. And this was a case of them not being rich enough and not being smart enough that they actually had to bribe them. They couldn't just say donate a whole lot of money to the school. This was bribing individuals.
Yeah, I have to be honest, I actually was a bit surprised because I figured that people that have like every advantage in life probably didn't need to cheat. Like if they have access to like summer camps and tutors and stuff like that, Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
that's already easy mode, but to actually just blatantly like cheat their way in. Oof.
I mean, that's just like you assuming that they actually care at that point. I think they're just the children are just so spoiled
Yeah.
and that they think that they deserve everything in life. They never actually worked for anything. So they like just goof off naturally throughout their younger days, and then once they hit college, they're like, "Oh shoot, I don't actually know anything," and my parents know that, so they have to like pay.
And
Um,
this really throws a big wrench in the machine of like this idea that in the United States everyone starts at like the same level and everyone works hard. And if you work hard, then you'll succeed. This kind of like fucks all that up, right? Because
I mean,
people at the top can just cheat their way through the whole process and be successful for it because
does
they'll have
anyone
their
really
degree from an Ivy League school.
does anyone really believe that that's a thing though? That everyone's born the same?
I mean, it's probably less popular these days. Yeah.
You know, the funny thing that I read before starting this podcast was that Dr. Dre posted something that said his daughter got into USC without any of that bribery today,
Mm.
either today or yesterday. But the funny thing was that he actually paid like $70 million or whatever to USC for like charity and stuff and starting like foundations and whatnot.
Yeah, okay.
So is that really on your own at that point? If you paid $70 million,
Yeah, it's hard for
Yeah,
them to say no to you. Yeah.
yeah.
yeah. USC is just the school for the LA people. Uh,
Mhm.
so some other funny things, like so they had multiple fake football players, I guess, for USC.
Mhm.
Uh, but some things of that, like, obviously that's going to be stupid because it's a lot easier to hide them in other sports, which is why that's mostly what they're doing.
Mhm.
Like just the say going to join like the sailing team and then they just quit right away, so they just get in off the athletes' conditions. But the guy who was helping them commit this fraud, it was saying that while they could do it for USC, they couldn't do it for schools like Notre Dame because for people with GPAs that low, they have to be a contributor, so they couldn't just hide.
Mm.
That and also, I believe one of the players was supposedly from New Hampshire,
Mhm.
which New Hampshire does not produce football recruits. Either
No.
New Hampshire or Vermont. I think it was New Hampshire.
Well, I mean, Notre Dame is much, from my experience, my limited experience in sports, is a much more football-oriented school than USC, right?
No, they're,
It
they're
is.
they're both two of the most historic programs and big rivals.
I see.
It's just so, and because USC is supposed to be pretty good academically too, so it's just kind of hilarious that
Mhm.
Notre Dame has that jab at USC now. But USC's entire athletic department's kind of a dumpster fire at the moment,
Mm.
and much of the other administration too.
Yep. So, I think, yeah, money's just this needs to be addressed in the future. I don't think that this is well, life isn't fair in general, anyways, but this kind
Yeah.
of takes it
Like the
takes the cake.
purpose of society is sort of to try to make things as fair as possible, right?
Mm.
So even if it's not fair, that's not an excuse to just lay down and take it.
No, 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 no. Things definitely need to be changed. But I'm just saying, like that's a fact of life.
Yeah.
Go ahead. So, another dumb thing that's been going on recently is the failure of Brexit and how they can not come to an agreement of how to actually separate from the EU. Personally, I think that the UK should just stay with the EU because basically this is the equivalent of one of the US states saying that they want to split and then they expect like other countries in the world to respect them as like a nation, which just isn't gonna happen at this stage. Because
Well,
once you got like powers like the U.S., China, and all those Russia, all those big countries, you can't really just compete as like a smaller entity on your own.
it would be a big state, but yeah, the petition to revoke Article 50 has now crossed 5 million signatures.
Mm.
I don't think you can just like do another referendum or whatever, or just ignore this one, right? Because it's like the will of the people. You're just like ignoring About if you're gonna go to the people and ask them what to do, and then they give you an answer, you can't just be like, "Yeah, well, fuck that."
Well,
What kind of democracy is that?
no one knew it was a non-binding thing that no one was really sure what it meant, and had
Well,
meant
I
it's
mean,
stupid.
tough titties, you know. That's how it works. You have to figure the shit out before you vote the first time, or else, like, what's the point? How many votes do we have to do before we all know that this was the one where we were all informed?
Isn't there a Pelosi quote like that? You have to vote for it to see what's inside. But no, there was I mean, yeah, they couldn't know what Article 50 would say until they actually started negotiating it because it hadn't been done before and wasn't really clear.
I think we got duped. I was watching a bit of the parliamentary stuff, and I don't really understand anything about UK politics or how it's structured. But I guess like there are these two sides. I think they're opposing each other because they're yelling at each other a lot. But you had like a Jeremy Corbyn, which is the leader of the Labour Party, and you had Theresa May, isn't that her name?
Yeah.
The Prime Minister. And my understanding is that both of them, individually, both of them were for staying in the EU. However, they both represent parties that want to leave. So if you have these two people that personally kind of wanted to stay, but now they're arguing with each other and the best way to like leave. It just seems like a little weird situation.
I mean, isn't it just dumb though that party politics is the way it is?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they're supposedly need a resolution by the 29th of March.
I
So
thought they got their extension.
They got a
that-
short extension under the condition that they accept like May's plan or that they re-vote on Theresa May's original plan, which is really it's already been shot down twice now.
Yeah.
do you know when the extension is to then? Because like when I'm googling the whole situation, it says 29.
No. But yeah, this is going to end poorly. It's like some of what they want is impossible. Like they want to keep Northern Ireland, and they want to have a strong border, but you can't put a strong border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. So you could put the strong border between Northern Ireland and the rest of Great Britain, but that wouldn't work very well. So it's just they're proposing some fake technology thing, very ephemeral for what they could do.
They try to enforce a strong border between the two Irelands. They could like lead to the rise of the IRA again, right?
Yeah, they can't do it because of the what is it, Good Friday Agreement?
Mm-hmm.
Why is there even a Northern Ireland and a normal Ireland?
Because UK colonized Ireland basically, and so I guess that part of Ireland originally was very resistant. So they took a bunch of plantations there or something. So now the population there is, well, I guess more Protestant atheists than Catholic atheists these days. But ugh.
I see.
So looking like it's going to be a no deal Brexit. That's the feeling I'm going to get.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, they announced this like 2016, right? Brexit.
Yep.
It was like some time ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to revoke Article 50 with 5 minutes left, and then try it.
Well, for what it's worth, I think that it's better for the UK to stay than to leave.
That definitely is, yeah. But I kind of enjoy watching.
You enjoy watching
Yeah.
the drama from the sidelines.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was really excited when it happened when they voted for it originally because it was just that's going to be interesting.
Look, if they got to like be entertained and somewhat horrified by us electing Trump, obviously we can be entertained by their Brexit stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Although I don't know whether Trump is worse or Brexit is worse.
It's I don't know. I'm sure there is a clear answer. I just don't know what it is.
X-wise, I'm pretty sure it's Brexit.
Brexit could be really disastrous to our economy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, anyways, we'll follow up on that Brexit deal in future podcasts. But for now, let's move on to the 737 MAX crashes that have been going on around the world. One was in Indonesia, and the other one was in Ethiopia, right? So
Yes.
several countries have started saying that they won't actually use those planes anymore until like a fix has been put out. I think the U.S. was kind of late on that train, but I think the U.S. has also said that they weren't going to use those planes right now. So I don't know. Do you think? I mean, obviously this hurts Boeing quite a lot, but I think they'll bounce back eventually, right?
Yeah, they have to. There's only two main aircraft. Well, I mean, there's other companies, but it's Boeing and what's the European one?
Lufthansa? That was
No,
no, that's German airline. Never mind.
Airbus.
Airbus, yes.
Yeah,
I
but
think Boeing will be fine.
Yeah.
At this
Except,
point, I would suspect that the U.S. government would be willing to bend over backwards to save Boeing.
I wouldn't be surprised. I guess like the reason I asked that question is I noticed that some of my investments are going down because I have Boeing stocks.
yeah. So the story is that Boeing was needing a new design for their narrow bodies, I believe, and then they were kind of forced to come up with this one because Airbus released a new one. But so unfortunately, the 737 body uh, wasn't as able to it wasn't as good at the body couldn't respond to the design as well because the design it's been around for decades. Because the new design was a bigger, more fuel efficient engine, but just the 737, it was so close to the engines are so close to the ground now that they had to change some stuff. So this whole thing was just basically if it thinks that the pilot's going to put it into a stall, it'll fight against it. Then there's a sensor in it that I guess went bad in the Indonesian one, so that it was just fighting the pilot.
I see.
Yeah, normally these planes have several levels of redundancy. So if something goes wrong, the whole plane doesn't just like mess up. So the part that they were missing on this was that redundancy that was supposed to save them.
That and for whatever reason, just it's harder to turn off this thing. Like normally you can pull back on the stick, I guess, to turn it off, and this time you couldn't. Because just before the Indonesian flight that crashed, a different one, they were able to turn off the thing because some other pilot on there knew how to do it. But
I
so,
mean, I guess like the security measures should be easy, right? They shouldn't like change it like how how in the beginning when stoves were like those knobs and stuff, and then they changed to that touchscreen that could break, or even like car stuff, like volume settings need to be touchscreen. Like, there's no need for that. Just keep it simple, user friendly, and you know what to do like when there's an emergency.
well, from what I heard, Boeing just kind of sent out this patch that had it without really telling people. But then the other thing was that they're like, sure, this is the same as the 737, so that people wouldn't have to get recertified, even though it behaves rather differently because of the new design.
Yeah.
And just so I believe it was the Lion Air one had a simulator for the 737 MAX 8 that the pilots hadn't trained on it. And then
So were most of these planes passenger planes that were like full of people?
yeah,
I think so, yeah.
And everyone died in both crashes?
yes.
Yeah, I know the Indonesian one is definitely all of them died, but I don't know about the Ethiopia one. But I assume that it's the same thing.
It's a 737. It'd be weird if it's not a passenger plane.
Yeah, I suppose.
Well, so yeah. I guess the last topic that we have for today in the politics side of things is that New Zealand shooting that happened. Very. How many people were involved in that one? Was it like 60?
Something like that, yeah.
Something relatively high. And then the response from the New Zealand government 3 days after was to ban all like semi-automatic weapons, which makes sense. I'm surprised that the U.S. can't even do that. Like, why would you need semi-auto weapons in the first place?
There's too much political will against it because people
There
want that.
is, because the NRA and all that other stuff going behind the scenes that stop it. But I think when I was looking previously, the U.S. has already had a lot of mass shootings in 2019 already. I think it was around 70, and we still can't agree that like some guns need to be restricted. I mean, I know it's not all the guns' fault, like we said in the previous podcast, but like that would at least help out a little bit, lowering the access to these weapons.
Yeah. Yep.
But I feel like we're just like doing the same song and dance every time a shooting happens, and it's like, oh, it's a tragedy, blah blah blah. Why aren't we doing anything about it and move on with our lives? I feel like that's how it goes all the time.
Yeah, I think that also puts some responsibility on some of the right-wing media outlets, or not necessarily even media outlets, but it could be like just sort of the like YouTubers or just people that are big on Twitter that sort of put out all this information on like how the West is under attack and all of this stuff, and you sort of get people feeling really desperate and then they're going to respond to these acts of violence. I think that people need to use their speech responsibly, and if you're going to start getting into like race relations stuff, you need to be really responsible with your messaging.
Yep.
As for banning semi-autos, you'd probably have to amend the Constitution or something.
Because of the Second Amendment?
Yeah, with how they're interpreting it now.
I mean, I like this whole interpretation thing is kind of like whatever to me, because back in the day when they designed the Constitution, they didn't even think that semi-autos would like exist in the future.
Yeah.
So I feel like that doesn't really.
Yeah, but just the modern interpretation, how they have interpreted it.
Yeah, it's a little bull, if you ask me.
Oh well.
But anyways, I think that wraps up the first part of our podcast today. The politics section is done. We have a lot of gaming news, surprisingly, as well this week. So, similar to last week, that'll be a longer section for you guys. So, we'll be back in a little bit.
Welcome back. Now in gaming. First up, Nintendo's up to something weird again. So they recently announced a project with an indie company with their Legend of Zelda property called Cadence of Hyrule: Crypt of the Necrodancer, featuring the Legend of Zelda, which, as the name suggests, is working with the Crypt of the Necrodancer people.
I mean, that game was pretty fun for what it's worth. I think the rhythm-based games, like usually I'm not a big fan of them, but that one was pretty neat in terms of how the combat was done, in terms of how like the whole system was done in general. So I think that this would be a pretty good merge between the two. I think Legend of Zelda music would be pretty nice to incorporate into that dancing format.
Yeah.
I can't say I'm a big fan of roguelites in general, so this won't really appeal to me. But it's interesting what they're doing.
Yeah, you played the first game, right?
No, I haven't. Never played Crypt of the Necrodancer.
I think the only roguelikes I've played are the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games.
Those do those really count?
They have procedurally generated dungeons.
Okay, but there's no like permadeath or anything.
No, well, that's the closest thing I've got to them.
I played FTL. I guess that kind of counts.
Yeah, that does. I think I have that, but no, yeah, I haven't really done much of those. I don't know that I've really played a rhythm game because those haven't appealed to me. Yeah, procedurally generated in general is just, it feels like you can't make a properly looking world if it's all random. It's not random, but...
Looking at the definition of roguelikes, I haven't played much either. I assume you've played Binding of Isaac?
Nope.
Yeah, I've played
popular. Risk of Rain.
Played a little bit of it, yeah.
Diablo is of that category.
I feel like that's kind of stretching the definition. I guess the primary attribute that I give roguelites is anything with permadeath or anything like that.
Mm.
But yeah, I guess Diablo has like dungeons that are random somewhat.
Yeah. Well, I guess the next thing that we have, though, that's like the major gaming topic of this week is Google Stadia, which is their game streaming service that originated from their beta test called Project Steam. Now, it's basically where you don't need the hardware yourself to like run the game, but you just stream it from Google's servers. I think that this is probably like a big milestone in terms of how we game in the future. I think that right now it's probably like the start of VR where it's not going to be that great in the beginning, but over time I can see that being a major player in the market where people don't have to actually buy hardware that costs a lot and instead pay a subscription or something and buy the games like a Netflix style thing and just be able to stream that onto their local computer or even tablet.
Because that isn't new. Because PlayStation's been doing something like that, but I don't know if the infrastructure is fully there yet for the streaming, like high quality, especially if everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
Because the ISPs already fight against everyone streaming Netflix at the same time.
Yeah, because people typically have data caps, right? It would be like 1 terabyte or something.
Yep.
And I assume with streaming a video game with whatever quality it's at, it might not even have compression on it. Will probably eat up a lot more data than Netflix.
Comcast definitely added a terabyte data cap to my family recently.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that from what I saw when I was doing the Project Steam stuff, it was running Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and the quality was actually pretty good. I didn't have any stuttering or anything like that.
So do you
I
notice
forget what the
any?
graphics were turned to, but
Do you notice any input lag?
not really. It wasn't that bad. Then again, I'm really insensitive to input lag because people say that when they play certain competitive games that they see the TV has input lag, and I really don't notice any of that really.
Mm-hmm.
So there could be, but I could discern it.
I wonder how major these servers have to be. Like, what if you could sort of have a mini server for every big like apartment complex? That would probably cut down on input lag a lot, right?
Yeah,
And then
but
you like sort of sign everyone up to the service.
for every apartment complex, that seems like it'd be more expensive.
I mean, I don't know what the hardware looks like. It could be.
It all depends.
Well, so do you think that this kind of service will kill physical consoles? I know it won't kill PCs because people like that buttery smooth gameplay, but since the consoles aren't as
I mean,
good this one.
it'll definitely cut into their market, but I don't know, because they stopped making them for a loss, didn't they? The consoles, or are they still taking losses on them?
I feel like with the price points that they're selling them at, I would assume that there's losses.
Because if they're still taking losses on, I could see that being. Because Google is definitely willing to take a loss on their stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the great benefits of consoles is sort of the plug and play functionality they have, and I think you'll still have that advantage over having to like have an internet connection.
Does this not plug and play either?
Well, you have to have a constant internet connection for it.
Yeah, but your internet connection's usually plugged in already.
But if you're in the middle of nowhere, lousy internet, or say Australia, it's just not. You're not going to be able to stream these games.
I guess we're talking more and more on North America right now, right?
Yeah.
It could just be that your console is in a spot that doesn't really have like a good, either doesn't have a good Wi-Fi connection or doesn't have an easy way to plug it to the Ethernet.
Or that.
That's true.
Well,
Do you think Amazon will follow suit because they have their web service thing already set up? They have like the infrastructure.
well, I don't quite see it. Well, wait, don't they own Twitch?
They do own Twitch, which is why I
they
wonder.
probably, because wasn't that part of why Google's doing this to make YouTube more like Twitch?
That's
least-
probably
So,
one of the reasons.
Yeah. There are like different there are sort of different gimmicks you can add on to this. Like a streamer could, there's like some guy, like I think one example I brought up, a streamer could like set up a queue, and like maybe if a streamer's playing a fighting game or something, viewers could like easily join the queue to like face off against the streamer or something like that. I don't know. Something
There's
like
also this thing that they kind of want to implement is, do you know how in StarCraft you could pick up at a certain point in the replay and like play it out from there? They kind of want to do the same thing, but for like all games. So like if you're seeing a streamer being in a certain situation and you want to pick up at that point, you can with their service. And I think that's one of the goals that they're trying to strive for.
Oh, that's neat.
yeah, it's cool.
So I think that'll be pretty fun. It'll add like another layer of I guess immersion into like the streaming platform.
The speedrunning community will love that.
Basically like a save state, essentially. So I wonder how that will work, but I don't think this is gonna pick up until like several years down the line, though.
Yeah.
You need a lot of time to work out the kinks, and it's not gonna be smooth or like really when it's like widespread use, I think. So take some time.
I mean, this is Google. If we're talking several years, there's a really high chance that they'll just abandon the project after 2 years.
That's true.
Yeah.
Google does have a track record of doing that.
Yeah, but they'll probably have another project, maybe 2 in place when they abandon it. Oh, all these vacation apps, I don't understand. I never understood them.
Do you think they'll sell it to Amazon?
No.
Possibly.
No, and possibly. Why is that?
I think they'd rather take the loss than sell it to Amazon.
Because they don't want Bezos going up again?
Yeah.
I can see that.
Stadia. Really, Stadia?
What
I know.
Yeah, like what I guess another concern I have is this stuff isn't really new. OnLive started way back a long time ago, right? And it just didn't work out. I mean, people's internet connections are getting better, I guess, but that doesn't really. I don't know if people's like ping gets changed or whatever. I feel like it's probably pretty much the same as it always has been.
You probably really need fiber op to make this work.
No. Google was trying that, and then the other companies made it difficult.
Well, I've heard that, going back to the name Stadia, I've heard other people say that it sounds like a drug name. It's like, go ask your doctor about Stadia. And
No,
I thought
it's
that was
just
kind of like a weird name.
it's just the plural of stadium.
I know that's like what they're going for, but that it just doesn't scream gaming platform to me. It screams medicine.
I mean, their ad for or their initial trailer for it didn't really scream gaming either to me. So, oh,
Yeah. Well, I know that in the previous section I said that this was gonna be a longer gaming section, but we actually decided to cut out a few the topics at the end. So I think if we don't have any other thoughts or any other topics to cover, I think this is probably a good place to end it.
back to Cadence of Hyrule. This is going to be a non-canon game, but I would love to see what they'd have to do to the timeline to make this be part of it too.
Well, if it's not in canon, they can do whatever they want, right?
Yeah, but I just if they had to have this in the CDI games in the timeline, I think it'd be hilarious. that's my final thoughts.
Edward, anything else you want to add on?
Nope. I think we're good.
All right, cool. Since this is going to be like a shorter podcast, since we just discovered that Robert had something to do quickly, so we're going to skip the question section and just end it here. So that's the end of Armchair Authority podcast number 7. We'll see you guys back in 2 weeks.